Hey everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition. On this episode, I'm joined by Adam Cooper, who is a member of the Bajuggalo team with Remax Nova in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This was a fun conversation. We dove into Adam's story about moving from the UK to Canada and how that move actually led him to begin a career in real estate. We dive into three different buckets which represent Adam's passions. So one is the passion for raising the bar in the industry. The second is a passion around teams and team building. And the third around technology. And so we discuss each of those topics one at a time. This is a great conversation, and I know you will take some value from this interview. From Remax, this is Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition, where we chat with some of the best agents and brokers across the country and talk about the moves that took their real estate business to the next level. And on this episode, I'm honored to be joined by Adam Cooper, a member of the Bajuggalo team with Remax Nova in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Hailing from the UK, Adam has built his 13-plus-year real estate career on a foundation of honesty and long-lasting client relationships. He's passionate about technology, team building, and making a positive impact in the industry. Adam, welcome to Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition.
Hello, sir. Thanks for having me.
Excited for this conversation. We've been talking about it since early in the year. And the end of that bio there, talking about three things you're passionate about: technology, team building, making a positive impact. I want to approach each of those buckets one at a time because I think there's a lot we can dive into. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about how you got started in this industry. I mean, you hail from UK, currently based in Halifax. When did you come over to Halifax, and when did you know real estate was the career for you?
It's funny because that story, whenever I tell it, it seems kind of made up, but it's exactly how it happened. So my dad was looking at getting a job here in Canada, and he started, I'd have been like 13. And because he's a chartered accountant, it's considered a skilled job. But at the time in Canada, it wasn't a job they were in shortage of. So it took almost 10 years for us to get here. And then suddenly we were coming, it was moving real quickly. And my dad went on a Google search and he was buying a house in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And the Bajaggalo team came up. And we did the whole moving, getting here. The Bajaggalo team was who we went with. They looked after us. And after about a year being here, they asked me if I wanted to be an agent. And real estate's practiced very differently in England. Well, it certainly was when I moved. So I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to do that. And then they were like, follow us for a week and see how you feel. And having done it for like 2 days when just shadowing them, I was like, yeah, I can do this because this is a group that not only helped my family move here, but the way they're approaching real estate, it's more about client focus, building relationships, trying to make things as easy as they can. And that's literally how I got into the industry. And it's one of those things where I look back on it now and I would not be where I am today without the team. I'm incredibly lucky. I probably would have been like most of those agents that don't make it past those first 2 years because I was just put in an environment that was a very successful team and they just kind of showed me the way the whole way. And I was really lucky and fortunate to experience that from a client and then as an agent.
What are some of the key differences that you noticed between real estate in the UK and here in Canada?
Well, when I left England, basically how they were doing real estate was it was almost like you had a corner store and the listing cuts were in the glass, just up on glass windows, and you would walk in and say, there's a house there, I'm interested. The agent would call the seller and say, someone wants to see your house, can you show it to them? And the seller would show the buyer that property directly, and the agent kind of would pass the deal across. Representation didn't really seem to be a thing. And there was no real ramifications for exiting agreement. There's like a whole phrase, I think it's "kazumting" and "jerklumpting." And what would happen is before the deal closed, somebody could come in and throw 10, 20, 30,000 pounds over your price and the seller could take it without any ramifications to you. And there was a whole thing of people having offers in place, but really they were a proxy for somebody else to come in last minute and try and beat you down. And it felt very much like the Wild West. And then that was the thing is the agents turned up, they were paid to give you a market analysis. So they would charge 1% of your home to do that service. They'd list it, and that basically was all they'd really do. And that's why I felt like I don't want to do that. I don't feel like they helped us. And at the time, my mom was going through breast cancer. So we came here, did the tours of Toronto and Halifax, and decided we were going to move to Halifax. My mom had cancer surgery. She then came back within a week to buy the house. And in that time, there was just tomfoolery happening with their current sale on the home. And in my head, I was like, why do we have a real estate agent? Like, they're not even doing anything. Like, he knows the situation. He's not doing anything to help my parents right now. So when the guys are like, hey, do you want to be a real estate agent? That experience for my parents on the English side was just so I just didn't want to be part of it because I just felt like that's not what I wanted to do. I read a book early on, or had it read to me, and the one of the last lines was, whatever you do in life, just help other people. And I felt like, given what we do as a career, you're in a very fortunate position where you can help people. So why wouldn't you? So I just didn't see that on the English side of things. And then when I came into the Canadian system, I that's all I see. I see agents going above and beyond to help people. And that's where you get that pride of, I'm part of that group.
What I find interesting is for a lot of people, real estate was on their radar from a pretty early age. We've had a lot of second generation, sometimes third generation realtors who have been on the podcast so far who are part of that Young Leaders Network demographic. But for you, I'm guessing it probably wasn't simply for the fact being in the UK, the job was much different. You didn't have that experience, that discovery till you came over to Canada. So what was your initial thoughts at a younger age? Where did you think career-wise you were headed?
It's funny because that was a very strange time in my life because I got to Canada in 22, 23, so I was still young, and I felt like, even though you're an adult, you still feel like you're a teenager. So I'm into an environment when you're dealing with, very big situations, and often it's, someone buying their first home, or there's a divorce, or people are moving here and they've got a week to buy stuff, and it feels like this is really heavy stuff. And my brain was, I really know I need to be better to be able to help these people, because at that point I still had that mindset of win, loss, win, loss. There was no kind of like, it's not good or bad, it's how you perceive it. So I hadn't figured out that being accessible to those people and making sure they understood what was happening rather than trying to solve the problems was the important part. So early on, I had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I was like, I'm not sure if I can ever be as good as the guys in my team. And I remember going into my brokerage, and I was still doing training with the brokers as well as the team. And I think it was Ryan Hartland said to me, he's like, what's it like being on the team? And I was like, I feel like I'm on a bicycle and they are in a Ferrari. And that's how I feel. Um, but I think that kind of headspace also, it kept me kind of in check, and also made sure that I was not rushing to kind of get to an end product. I was kind of making sure I was learning things so that I could kind of progress, which in a way that was right for me.
So let's dive into these three different buckets. The first one being your passion for making a positive impact on the industry. This is something I've witnessed firsthand through your involvement with the Young Leaders Network as one of our ambassadors. Why is that important to you?
I've been very lucky in my life where I can't remember a time when there wasn't somebody helping me. And I very early went into team sports. And the best thing about being in a team is you involved in something bigger than yourself. And so I kind of carried that with me wherever I've gone. So there's a fantastic book called Legacy, which is about the New Zealand All Blacks, and they have like a set of rules that they all have, that in order to become an All Black you have to like sign up to. And one of them is you have to leave the jersey in a better position than you found it. And that's always resonated with me, is the idea of, you look at Remax and you look from where they started and what they were trying to achieve and how much further they've gone. But we have to, as people here, have to protect that. We have to also defend that, and we have to continue to grow and not be complacent. And I think the more we can look around and help each other raise and just increase the levels of our industry, the better it is for the consumer and the better it is for us as agents.
One of the things you're doing as well is not just bettering the industry, but I think you're bettering your community. And I want to give a specific example of this. We're recording this interview on Friday, November 1st. Yesterday was Halloween. You were involved in one of the REMAX initiatives, which is accessible trick or treating. I want to ask you this question because I think it's a great idea, a great concept of how you embraced it. And I'm hoping you can give other people inspiration for next year or future years Halloween. So talk a little bit about why did you wrap your arms around this initiative? What did that look like in your community?
So in my community, I live on a side street, but there's two very busy streets that are kind of intersect me. And since I first moved into my home, we get anywhere between 200, 300. I think the record we had was like 400 kids come by. And suddenly, whether you want to or not, you're involved in Halloween. And I think around COVID, because it was the kind of the first thing they let people here in Halifax go out and do, I actually built a complete slide where I could slide candy down to people so that we could do the bubbling thing. And people just loved it. And along the way, and as long as I've networked through the Remax network, I've come across people that have children that are disabled or have children that have accessibility issues. And when you talk to them on a level, and a lot of them always gravitate to like when it's Halloween, they get to like be like the other kids, they get to do it, but it's hard because there's things that get in the way. So, and I've thought about it for a while. So this year I was like, I know it's going to take a little bit coordinating because truly my house is on a little bit of a hill. So figuring this out would be a bit of a challenge, but I really wanted to do it just to make sure everyone could come by. And we actually had someone come by last night and he was partially sighted. And they saw the ad that we'd done it. And they came up and was like, we just want to thank you for having accessible trick or treating because he can do it, but there's always challenges every time we get to a home, whether it's the stairs, whether it's people jumping out at him. And he's like, we knew if he came here, he would be able to come. He wouldn't have to worry about anything. They showed him the sign. He thanked us. And it was just one of those times where you're like, we did this for the right reasons. And the people we did it for benefited. And I just felt really proud that we'd done it.
I love that so much. In order to make a positive impact on the industry, on your community, you have to yourself be positive, look after your own mental health. And I'm curious, you mentioned a couple challenges there, even in your own career with imposter syndrome and being new to the team and feeling like everyone was ahead of you. How do you ensure that you maintain a positive mindset and look after your mental health?
Um, well, I have the benefit of hindsight now. When I first got here, I had very bad homesickness just out the gate. I also grew up because I played sports quite a high level. I grew up in an environment where it was win, and if you lost, you got punished for it. So I had, unfortunately, in the early parts of my career, created quite bad habits mentally, where I put a lot of pressure on me, and my solution was when things went wrong to fester in it. I actually got very bad depression. I was diagnosed in 2014 and I look back at it now and just think I'm incredibly lucky that I had some really great people around me that were incredibly patient. One of them would be my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. And I think the hard bit was the problem with mental health stuff is that you don't realize you're in it or you've got a problem with it because you just can't shift. It's kind of like the expression, the forest for the trees. You just can't see past it. And when they diagnosed me, I'd tell people like, oh, I've got depression. And they'd punch you in the arm and say like, well, it's cloudy. That's all it is. Or you're young, you shouldn't be depressed. And it's like, yeah, but what they didn't realize is I'd moved countries. Prior to that, I had this career lined up where I was going to play volleyball professionally, blew my knee out. I tried to join the police service, but being dyslexic, they didn't take me on because I made too many spelling mistakes in my exam. I then moved countries and the support network around me had gone. And I'm in a very competitive industry where everybody's winning. And if you feel like you're losing, it's tough. And it took me a while to figure that out. And what I've learned from that now is I did spend a lot of time in therapy and I spent a lot of time just realizing that it is far better to sit down and tell people, you know what, I'm having a bad day. Can we just take a bit? Can we take a beat? I tend to always make sure that I stay active. I don't. I think that's the big thing too. Is that when you get into those cycles, it's really good to want to retreat. And I've learned myself to be, or I've taught myself to be more disciplined in the sense of I go to gym even if I don't want to, because by the time I finish the gym, I usually feel better anyway. So it's just a case of spending time making sure that you do the check-ins with you, and remember that just because somebody across the way looks like they have it all figured out, there's a good chance they don't. And if you keep looking at them, and then comparing yourself. Comparison really is the thief of joy. So you just got to kind of stay in your lane, focus on what's actually important, and just make sure that you surround yourself with great people. Because the one thing my wife did, and it's probably the best thing that anyone's ever done for me, is when I was in the mud and it was really, really bad, she just came and sat with me and said, like, and every time I was having a bad day, she was like, we'll figure it out. There was never that time where it was like, just get up and suck it up. It was just always like, I'll be here no matter what. And you just didn't feel alone anymore. And then eventually you start to figure out the things you need to do, the things you need to, the places you need to go, what you need to do. And just having someone that, like I said, is prepared to sit with you in the mud and say, I know you'll get out of this and I'll be here when you do. That was incredibly powerful for me.
Moving along to the second bucket you're passionate about, which is team and team building. You ultimately made the decision to join the team, and I'm curious, did that break down? I mean, obviously they had helped your family, and they showed an interest, so probably you're going to gravitate regardless. But in general, had you not had that experience and you were just coming into the real estate industry, do you think, given your background in sports, you still would have gravitated toward team versus going it as an individual?
Yes, because I think I've always been the kind of person where I like how teams are run. I like the idea that you're not in it alone.
Mm.
I like the fact that we're in a position where you've just got so many people around you that you can lean on, you can get support. And that's something that you only really get in a team. The industry is full of some incredible agents, especially individual agents. And I look at them and we have conversations. And I do think for me personally, I don't know if I could have done that because I like having my guys around me. I like making sure my guys are okay. I have a newer agent on my team. He's 3 years in, so he's not new anymore. He will surpass me in everything I've done in my career very quickly and very easily. And I cannot wait to see that. I look forward to it because it just the idea of the guys brought me on, I've helped someone else come on and to see them take up and go, like it's just incredible to be a part of that. And you only really get that in teams, and that's the things that I really love to see is just helping other people grow.
My understanding is you made a transition at one point from being more of a buyer's agent to a seller's agent. Why did you make that transition and what went into it?
I think part of it's naturally just the way your career progresses. When you start out new, or when I did, I found that I resonated really well with buyers because I liked the education component of teaching them through the kind of process. But eventually all buyers turn into sellers. So you just have that point where the people you've sold in the past, especially if you've done a good job, like you enough or remember you enough that they want you to come in and help them sell their homes. It is as someone that's now been doing it for over a decade, you do start to kind of remember at times like, oh, I'm a seller's agent, so I need to protect this point of view. Versus when you're a buyer's agent, you're like, well, I need to exploit this because this is something that will defend my buyer better. Versus when you're a seller, you hope it doesn't come your way. So it is a bit weird having to switch the mindset. As when I'm in a home, I tend to tear it apart, and so my buyers know exactly what they're getting into. But obviously, I can't walk into a listing and just tell them all the reason why their home is terrible. So that was a hard thing for me because I do tend to be very matter of fact in how I approach things.
I'm curious to maybe not, but I asked this because my wife's from England. Did you find that there were some cultural changes you had to make as well, knowing that British tend to tell it like it is sometimes? Like, and you mentioned you walk into a house, you kind of tear it apart. Did you have that experience as well?
100%. I also had to really, really try not to swear because
Mm,
we swear a lot, and like I still do swear a fair bit, but like there's like a list of words that I can't say because it's just not gonna fly. But yeah, there's it's every now and again, especially when if I'm in a challenging situation, we'll come out of appointment and one of my partners, whether it's Kane, Matt, Steve, or Thomas, will be like, "Yeah, you went a bit British there. You were very blunt and very matter of fact." And I was like, "Well, whoops, I can't help it. It's like it's just how I was raised."
totally. Another element of team, in a way, is our Young Leaders Network ambassadors and how we work together as a team to grow and evolve this concept, this group for young REMAX agents, which is available for any agent 40 years old or younger. What do you hope for the YLN going into the future?
I think it's such a unique concept, and it's the idea of, because you often get shoehorned as someone that's younger as, well, you don't know anything. And wait till you get to my age and you'll figure it out. But they all skip that bit of like, there's a whole point in the middle where you've kind of got to learn it all. And the YLN is full of some incredible agents that are embracing their community, or embracing technology, or just just professional development. So you can sit with some incredibly knowledgeable agents who've kind of created their own path, carved their own path, and they'll share with you exactly how they did it. And it's just a space where it's incredibly safe. um, and we all kind of want each other to do better. There's almost like no competition in it, and it's just a really healthy space where we always approach things of, how can we make this better? How can we help each other? How can we support each other? Whether it's when Matt was raising money because he grew his hair out and he was cutting it short, like, we were all donating for that. When Trev did his fight for the cure, we were all donating for that. We're all just getting behind each other and championing each other, which isn't uncommon, but it is when you consider that we're from across the country, and we really are tied in by the fact that we're Young Leader Network. That's how we've all met, and we all just want each other to do really well.
One of the things you mentioned there that people bring to the table is technology, and that brings us into the third bucket of your passions being technology. Where does that passion stem from?
So I am quite badly dyslexic. So when I was through high school and going into university and that kind of stuff, I used to have a reader and a writer because my dyslexia is so bad. It's actually why my lenses are tinted blue, because I was, from the age of about 13, they treated it with vision therapy. So it doesn't fix my dyslexia, it just makes it easier for me to read. Um, so from a young age, um, I really had to work really hard to kind of be average. And I'm a twin. So it doesn't help that in England, they like to sit twins next to each other. And my twin is incredibly smart. So he'd be miles ahead of me and I just couldn't keep up. And my dad and mom said to me, he's like, look, you can have all this help in the school system, but there'll come a point where you got to go into the real world and you're not going to have someone read for you. You're not going to have someone write for you. So you just got to figure it out. And as I entered the workforce, finding things that were technology based that would kind of level the playing field for me was huge. And the first one was BombBomb, the ability for me to send a video message in an email or a text rather than try and type it out, change how I did my follow up. And as we move into AI, it's like I can debate with ChatGPT, or try and have it transcribe stuff for me, or write things and I can just edit it. And it's the ability for me to get the crazy out and put it on paper. Because the most frustrating thing I've always had is, there's some really good ideas up there, but I'm trying to get it out has always been something I've struggled with. So leaning into the technology part of things is something that I feel gives me lots of different ways where I can focus on being more efficient and then be better and have more time to spend with my clients.
There are a few people in our network that have dove pretty deep into the AI side of things, and I know you are one of those people. You mentioned a couple ways that you can use it there. Is there one, maybe, I guess, like a gem or something that's not on many people's radar, something that you've discovered has helped you save a lot of time, be more productive? One tip you could share with this audience?
Using the voice feature. So I like I said, I try and stay active. So I usually will spend at least 20 to 30 minutes on the track. Now I go to an indoor track at the Canada Game Center. So I'll put my earphones in and I'll fire up ChatGPT and I'll say to it, like I did an AI presentation for Remax Nova. And I was like, this is the demographic I'm talking to. These are the subjects I want to kind of explain to them, but I'm struggling in how to order this. And then it kind of talked it through with me. And we basically built the entire presentation while I was on the running track. So then when I got back to my computer, I had it transcribed. And what I like about it is that, being ChatGPT, it was like, oh, and these are all the positives. And I was like, yeah, but I'm also one to point out the negatives. And I need to point out kind of these flaws here. So these are flaws I'm seeing. And it was like, okay, this is how we'll order them. So it kind of helped me do the thinking part of it. So when I got back to my computer, I just built it because I'd done that bit. And so it eliminated the writer's block for it. And there's literally, I had to write a letter to contest something the other day. And I was like, these are my points. Does this flow? And it was like, yes, but don't forget this. And I was like, okay, that's great, because I did forget that. And it's that ability to have someone talking to you and helping you get those ideas out that I think is massively underutilized.
One of the first technology things that really stood out for you, as you mentioned, was Bomb Bomb. And I want to talk about video because I know you've put a lot of effort into evolving your video content, giving yourself various challenges. How have you approached video marketing?
Video marketing, I found, so video is an interesting one for me because, again, being dyslexic, reading and other media wasn't really my jam. Movies were. So I always had that passion anyway. But I found with video marketing, it's the truest way where you can kind of be your authentic self um, to anybody, and they can see your eyes, your tone, they can tell exactly what you mean. So, and I always wanted to build that in to our marketing. So I've always say when we're filming stuff or we're making stuff, I think as agents and people that market, we always look for a buzzword or we always look for an expression or a phrase. And it's like, that's great. But if you would never say that sentence out loud, it shouldn't be in your video because then you're losing the part of you that people want to see. And I feel like for me, that was the biggest takeaway, especially when you had like people like Casey Neistat and the original like YouTubers around where they were documenting their lives. It wasn't scripted, it was real. And I think that that's the fundamental thing that I loved about video was I could be me, I could show them all my kinds of weird. And that's how you meet people. Like I've done deals that found me because we have we have HalCon here, which is kind of like Comic Con, but in Halifax. And I dress up as Indiana Jones. And
Yes.
people were taking pictures of me as Indiana Jones. And I made a vlog about it. And I have clients that found me like, you're the Indiana Jones guys, right? Will you help me buy a
Wow.
house? And I bet you if I'd said when I was like a new agent, I'm going to make videos about how I occasionally cosplay as Indiana Jones, the old school agents would have said that's a terrible idea. No one will take you seriously. But people liked my kind of crazy. And video is the best way to show it off.
Adam, this has been a great conversation. We like to end every episode of Power Moves by asking you, what is your power move when it comes to real estate?
My power move would be I think there's nothing better than whether it's video, whether it's phone, whether it's text, telling your client exactly how you think something's going. So every now and again, I'll say to a client, like, I've just come out of a very messy deal where it was getting worse and worse and worse for him. And I was like, listen, I can tell you what you want to hear, or I can tell you what you need to hear. And the truth is, you need to walk away. And I know that sounds crazy, and that puts you in a really awkward spot because you've got a hard deadline you want to meet. But this only leads to disaster for you. The plumber says it, the inspector says it, and I'm telling you, I'll do whatever you want me to do, but I can't not tell you what you need to hear. And I always do that because I think at times we're worried about giving someone bad news or not telling them exactly what they want to what they need to hear. And then the worst happens and it's, oh, you should have told me. So I would rather than be mad at me on the front than resent me on the back end.
Well, and I think that goes back to something we mentioned earlier in the conversation, how you've built your career around honesty. Adam, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Power Moves Young Leaders Network Edition. I think there was a ton of value that the audience will take.